Hello guys, and welcome to the detailing part of the blocking chapter that we went through in the last video. Here we're going to continue right where we left off, finishing this trim piece for the door. And I want to talk about a little bit about how I approach design. I don't really, I'm not really a designer per se, but I do know, what I want to get in the end. So I'm constantly trying to, research stuff and figure out how things work and why things look, good in certain scenario and bad in another, and how color and light, influence this kind of stuff. So I was looking at the buildings of the reference that I posted on my Gumroad from Dublin, and I was like, Dublin is a very interesting city because it has, well, first of all, it's a medieval city. It was a medieval city. So there's a lot of influence of that, and there are a couple of rules and stuff they have that, doesn't allow, for example, a building to be above certain size. So a lot of the designs of the houses are very simple, but practical. So because I wanted to get this Dublin feel for my environment, I kind of chose to not go crazy with the sci-fi-ing of Dublin, because it's just gonna look too foreign. It's gonna look too unrealistic, because if the same people would design a future Dublin, it's gonna look pretty much the same, or at least have a lot of similarities. Of course, things will change based on technology and circumstances, but you know what I mean. I wanted to kind of capture that idea. So a lot of my design choices are very simple, as you can see. I did a test before I started this building, that I was telling you about in the previous video for the triangles, where I took just a section, like a very small section of a building, and I wanted to go crazy high tech. Let's explore what would this look like if it was very sci-fi heavy, with a lot of angular cuts and hard edges overlapping pieces, and it looked really nice, but it didn't look anything like Dublin. It didn't give me that small alley Dublin feel. It looked more like a sci-fi game or something like that. So not always it's worth it to make things complicated. Was that was the point of the whole conversation, is that choose your battles wisely. You don't always have to do crazy stuff. Sometimes the simple things work better, if it serves the story. So in this chapter, we're gonna explore a lot of techniques for creating cables and wires, and a lot of different stuff. And it's very repetitive. To an extent, it's very repetitive stuff, and it's very hard to think of stuff to say, to be honest, a lot of times, because as soon as I show you, okay, this is how you extrude a box and make a building, well, how you make a fuse box, well, it's the same thing pretty much. So this is a good opportunity to talk about Maya's NURBS modeling toolkit, which is not often used, but it is very powerful, and it has its use cases. I use a lot of Maya's NURBS tools when I want to create stuff like cars, for example, or any type of vehicle, because I can lay out the outline with a curve tools, and I usually use a CV curve tool with the section of 2 because it's a nice balance between smooth curve and control. So yeah, and then I use another curve, like a circle, for example, or a different profile, to extrude along the curve, using the extrude function in the NURBS modeling toolkit, to kind of make a tube or a pipe or anything like that. The good thing about NURBS, and here also I'm gonna mention paint effects, which a lot of people don't know that you can use paint effects for modeling. It also makes a really nice laid out UVs for you. So if you extrude something, if you take like something like a stroke from a paint effects, and if you hold shift, for example, and you drag and you make a straight stroke, when you convert that to polygons, you can choose a variety of options on how you want that to be translated to polygons. Like you can make it very dense, or you can make it just at the control points, or so there's a lot of options to play around with. So for this one I chose to go with the curve methods, because I already knew exactly what I want. I had all of these details drawn into the 2D stage, and this was literally just translating the 2D. Although when you draw the curve, it's gonna draw it as a straight line, especially if you do it from the front view or the side, or any orthographic view. So yeah, in order to follow the contours of the building, you need to do some shaping and adjusting, and for me that's very fun, because I can I use this stage as a way for me to kind of give myself a reason to go really deep into exploration of how things work in real life. For example, how the cables are collected together, what kind of clippers they use, what kind of what kind of bolts, and just Google stuff just to make it fun. At some point I think I even stopped the modeling and the recording. I would just went to Google and start typing stuff like, why do you use color coding wires, and what's the different colors mean, because I want it to be as authentic as possible. And also testing stuff at render time, just to see if if things are visible, even because a lot of times you just put all of your effort into something, and then you change your mind and it's like completely invisible, and you're like, okay, there goes nothing. So yeah, I mean, it's not like you're never gonna use it. Like I would probably use all of these assets in another scene at some point in in my career, when I'm doing something else, just as a filler objects, or at least as a base mesh to kind of start from. But it's always good to do not do over modeling, because over modeling can be just as bad as under modeling. So yeah, when I'm doing details, I like to be very very strict about how I play stuff, and because like speed is always the primary factor that I try to utilize when I work. It oftentimes limits me into it oftentimes limits my creativity, because I just want to get things done fast. But good ideas do not come fast, and sometimes I would notice that, and I would go back and either fix it or even remodel it completely, because I was rushing it. And you could argue that in the end, yes, I spent more time, but doing that often, you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. So you kind of choose your battles, and you slow down when you have to. But stuff like this, where for example the curve had only had 2 points, worked great in the curve, but once you convert it to geometry, you realize that's actually not going to work, because if I put a texture on it and I subdivide it, it's going to stretch the texture. So it's one of the reasons why I tell to modelers to learn as much as they can to the pipeline before and after their stage, because the more you know about texturing, it's gonna, the better modeler you're gonna be, because you're gonna put the edges in the right place, and the amount of edges is gonna be correct, so texture artists will not hate you. And and also try to avoid tangents and perfectly straight lines. Like as you can see in this cable, for example, I spent a lot of time. Like, this is sped up quite a bit, and you can see I'm talking for it for like I don't know, 5-10 minutes already, because I really want to make sure that this cable looks natural and it doesn't look like it's being computer generated, because cable in real life, they're affected by gravity. So if you put them, if you hang them, they're just gonna drop straight. But it never really happens, because you have these pins that you have on the wall, and people oftentimes that do this, they don't have the patience to measure things and make sure that the clip on the top is the same with the clip on the bottom, and they're perfectly aligned. So they're just bolting them to the wall so the cable does not fly away when there's wind or stuff like that. So there's gonna be wobbleness, and things gonna be distorted, and you should put that into your model as well, because if you compare what makes things realistic, it's the imperfections, it's the all the little stuff that we don't think about when we model. So like missing a clip or spreading things out that is not that even. For example, if you have like 5 clips in a row, like you can put like 3 of them evenly spaced, but then one of them, like in the middle, you can move it left or right and kind of closer to one end, because in reality, as I mentioned, people are not that careful. Like, there's rarely ever you see this being executed especially in outdoor environments perfectly. And so you gotta be like a really, really rich and picky person to kind of have that in your building. And this is a bar, and bars are, well, there are places where people go to hang out and chill and have fun, and they don't care about if the cable is perfectly straight coming out of the neon sign. So I just want to just kind of try to think about the use case of the object you're doing and how would that be in real life, and it's gonna go a long way in your work. So yeah, this is one of the things I noticed in the Blade Runner movies, where you have these giant pillars, they're being bolted to the concrete, and to me that was really fun. And I also noticed this kind of stuff throughout Dublin, not with buildings, but with like giant concrete blocks around the street that has like a specific purpose, but they are being bolted with metal to the ground. So it kind of fit my my idea, and I just wanted to put that in. And so here's me making a bolt, which is, I probably spent way too much time and added way too much detail in this bolt for the size of it. But in the end, it's a bolt. As I mentioned, I'm building a kit. This bolt is probably going to be used in every single environment that has bolts from here on out. So yeah, I mean, it's a long-term investment. Yes, it does a little bit, it does add a bit of geometry to the scene, but like I keep arguing with people that nowadays ray tracers have way more freedom with geometry than in the past. Like in the past, we were very, very careful how many polygons we put, in our models, and we still are, but that bar is way higher. So, yeah, I mean, you don't have to be that careful. Plus, I am going to be instancing that bolt instead of duplicating it, which means it's going to be pretty much fine. So yeah, just looking at my references, trying to figure out what I'm gonna do next. I pretty much started just duplicating the bolts into the other metal frames. I like this bolted feel. It makes it look very industrial, very rigid, which kind of fits perfectly with the tone of the render that I'm doing. So I kept using it over and over again in a lot of the buildings, just because it adds to the whole image. So I think I'm gonna start cleaning up and detailing some of the parts at the moment. So yeah, this is the part where I'm pretty much happy with the design. I'm pretty much happy with the details. So now it's technical stuff. Flip normals. Make sure you don't have any flip normals. Make sure you have all the geometry in the same group, named correctly, so you don't spend a lot of time searching for stuff later. And at this stage, I'm starting to get into the really, really detailed parts of this environment, where it's like LED lights, cut panels, that kind of stuff. So yeah, to be honest, there's not too much to talk about here. It's like, if you can download my Dublin reference pack, you're gonna see that most of these details were borrowed from some of the images, and we're gonna see this in great detail in one of the next chapters, where I'm gonna start modeling the props that I designed. So I'm trying to keep the real world reference as close as possible, because it's the real world. It doesn't get any more real than that, right? So yeah, as we're wrapping things up, I want to thank you guys for sticking around so far, and I hope you like it. Please feel free to comment if you have if you have anything to say, like if you prefer a different type of narration, or if you have any ideas, because I am planning to do more of these videos in the future. So it would be great to hear what you guys think about it. And yeah, if you feel like you can support me on my Gumroad page, and I'll see you guys in the next chapter.